When Shaquille O'Neal walked through the front doors of Robert G. Cole High School in San Antonio, Texas, on a Tuesday morning in March, he was wearing gray sweatpants, a plain navy hoodie, and a pair of worn-down sneakers that had seen better days. No security, no assistant, no cameras. The kind of quiet he almost never gets to have anymore. The building smelled the way all schools smell. Industrial cleaner, old paper, and something underneath all of that you can only call time. The fluorescent lights in the front office hummed at a frequency that sat just below thinking. He stopped just inside the glass doors and looked around the way a man does when he is trying to remember something he has not thought about in 30 years. The woman behind the front desk looked up from her computer screen. She took him in once, slowly, from the top of the doorframe down. Then she said, without smiling, "You need to sign in. And you need an appointment." She said it the way people say things they have already decided before you open your mouth. 4 championships, 28,000 points, a net worth of $400 million, one of the most recognized faces on the surface of the earth. She reached for the phone on her desk. "Actually," she said, "a man your size walking in unannounced, I'm going to need you to wait outside while I call someone." And Shaquille O'Neal looked at her and said absolutely nothing. He did not move toward the door. He stayed exactly where he was and let his eyes move across the front office the way they always did in a new room, quietly, slowly, missing nothing. The first thing he noticed was the bulletin board to his left. Standard laminated flyers, a chess club sign-up, a bake sale announcement. But in the upper right corner, pinned, slightly crooked, was a piece of yellow paper that had been there long enough to fade at the edges. It read, "An era ends, honoring Mrs. Dorothy Caldwell, 38 years of service, final day, May 30th. Someone had drawn a small heart in blue ballpoint pen beside her name, carefully, the way a student draws something when they are trying to say something they do not have the words for. He looked at it, said nothing, kept moving. The second thing he noticed was the front desk itself. The woman, her name badge read Sandra M., had a desk drawer pulled half an inch open. Inside, visible at the edge, was a thick manila envelope with a red district administration stamp across the front. The words "Final Notice" were legible from 12 feet away. She had not noticed him notice it. The third thing was on the windowsill directly behind her. A small clay pot, painted in thick, uneven colors the way children paint when they are 7 years old, and the goal is love, not precision. A sticky note was taped to its rim. From where he stood, he could read 4 words before the fold cut the rest away. "Don't let them take." And from somewhere deep inside the building, traveling through 2 sets of doors and a long stretch of corridor, and arriving in that front office like something that belonged there, came the sound of a woman's voice, reading aloud. Unhurried, warm, the way people read when they have been doing it for so long that the words are no longer separate from the air. Now here is the part that nobody standing in that front office understood yet. There was a reason Shaquille O'Neal had driven himself to this school on a Tuesday morning and walked through those front doors alone. There was a secret he had been carrying for 11 months, since the last real conversation he ever had with his stepfather, Philip Harrison, in a hospital room in Newark, New Jersey. Philip had told him 3 things. 3 sentences about a woman neither of them had seen in 32 years. A woman who had made a decision about her own life, a decision that had changed Shaquille's permanently, and who had never told a single living person about it. What the woman behind the front desk had absolutely no idea about was this. She was not blocking a celebrity from getting a photograph. She was standing between a son and a debt that had been waiting 32 years to be paid. Trust us. You are not going to see this ending coming. Stay with us for the whole video. because what Miss Dot wrote in the summer of 1991 is about to change everything you think you know about this story. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey, a city where winters arrive mean and the streets do not apologize for what they ask of you. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 19 years old when he arrived. Small woman, the kind of small that makes you underestimate her right up until the moment she opens her mouth and you understand that she has never needed the inches. She raised her son on two things: the idea that hard work was not optional, and the idea that your circumstances do not get to write your ending. She said it differently depending on the day, but it always landed the same way. "Nobody gives you what you're worth," she told him once, when he was 7 years old and complaining that a teacher had graded him wrong. "You make them recognize it." He never forgot the way her jaw set when she said that. He carries it still. His biological father was not in the picture. That is the short version, and the only version that matters here. What matters is who stepped in. Philip Harrison was a United States Army sergeant who married Lucille when Shaquille was 2 years old. Strict, organized, the kind of man who made his bed at 5 a.m. on his days off, because discipline was not something you wore when other people were watching. He was not easy to love at first. But Philip Harrison had one sentence he said so often it stopped being a sentence and became something else. Became weather, became the permanent atmosphere of every room he occupied. "Don't be a reaction," he said. "Be a response." He said it when Shaquille got into fights at school. He said it 11 months ago in that hospital room, in a voice barely above a whisper, because it was the only true thing he had left to say. Shaquille keeps Philip's Army Challenge coin in the right pocket of everything he wears. It was in the pocket of the Navy hoodie that morning. It always is. The family moved when Shaquille was 13. The Army sent Philip to Fort Sam Houston, and just like that, they were in San Antonio, a city Shaquille did not know, in a school he had never heard of. Sitting in classrooms full of kids who had been together since the first grade and had no particular interest in making room for a 6'2" 8th grader who was reading 3 levels below where he was supposed to be. 3 teachers told him, in different ways with different words, the same essential thing, that he was going to have a hard time. One said it plainly. One said it by placing him in the back corner. One said it by not calling on him for 6 consecutive weeks. 13-year-old Shaquille O'Neal learned a particular skill during those first months in San Antonio. The skill of making himself small in rooms that had already made their decision about him. Dorothy Caldwell's classroom was different from the first day. She was not tall. She was not young. She had been at that school for 11 years already, and she carried herself the way people do when they have decided exactly who they are and stopped requiring anyone else's confirmation. Her classroom smelled like coffee and old books and possibility. She had a rule about seating. Nobody sat in the back corner. She moved the desks herself. She also had a rule about reading aloud. Everybody did it, including her, every single day. No exceptions. Not for the kids who struggled. Not especially for the kids who struggled. The first time she called on Shaquille O'Neal, he stumbled through 4 lines of a Gary Soto poem and stopped. The room went quiet. Dorothy Caldwell said, "Good. Keep going." Just that. He made it through the rest of the page. She said, "Good. Same time tomorrow." She kept him after school that day, and the next day, and the next, and the next, for 11 months. Every weekday. Not because the district told her to, not because there was extra pay attached, because she had looked at a 13-year-old boy sitting in the back corner of someone else's classroom and decided something about him that she did not announce and did not negotiate. What Philip Harrison told Shaquille in that hospital room 11 months ago was this. In the summer of 1991, Miss Dot had received an offer from the Houston Independent School District, head of the English department at Lamar High School, salary 3 times what she was earning at Cole. Philip had found the letter decades later among Miss Dot's correspondence with the school. At the top, in red pen, she had written one word: declined. At the bottom, in the same red pen, 4 words. Philip pressed the letter into Shaquille's hand and closed his eyes. "Go find her," he said, "before it's too late for both of you." Sandra Murdoch was 56 years old. She had grown up in Converse, Texas, 20 minutes outside San Antonio, the daughter of a school bus driver and a grocery store clerk who had both worked their entire lives at jobs that paid them slightly less than what their lives cost. She had wanted to be a pediatric nurse. She had the grades. She had been accepted to the nursing program at UTSA in 1988, and she had deferred 1 year to help her mother after her father had a stroke. Then 1 more year, and then, in the way that years become decades when you are not paying attention, she had woken up at 32 and understood that nursing school was behind her. She had been at Cole High School for 19 years, and she knew every crack in every wall and every student who had ever sat in the front office waiting for a consequence they already knew was coming. 3 weeks before that Tuesday morning, she had received a letter from the district. Budget realignment. Retirement incentives. Position of Mrs. Dorothy Caldwell, English grades 7 and 8, to be eliminated effective May 30th. Sandra had made 7 phone calls. She had written 2 formal objections. She had collected letters of support from 21 years of Miss Dot's former students. She had attended a board meeting and spoken for 4 minutes to a panel of people who looked at their phones while she talked. She had lost. She had not slept well since. She went to bed most nights the way you go to bed when there is a math problem you cannot solve, with numbers still circling in the back of your mind, with the specific exhaustion of a person who is not tired but used up. The morning Shaquille walked in, she had already fielded 2 parent complaints before 8 o'clock, and a maintenance issue in the East Wing that had gone unaddressed for 6 days. When a very large man came through the front doors without signing in, without an appointment, she reached for the phone before she consciously decided to. The words came the same way. "Wait outside while I call someone." The second sentence left her mouth, and she already knew something about it felt wrong. She said it anyway. 12 minutes after he first walked in, Shaquille O'Neal was still standing in the front office of Robert G. Cole High School. Sandra had called the school resource officer, a 34-year-old named Officer T. Dawson, who arrived with his hand already moving toward his radio before he fully assessed what he was walking into. There were 4 other people in that office. Marcus Webb was 24 years old and in the first semester of his student teaching placement under Mrs. Dorothy Caldwell. He had grown up 11 blocks from the school, had sat in Miss Dot's class at age 13, reading 4 levels below grade, same as the man across the lobby from him right now. He had gone to college on an essay that was half his own voice, and half the voice Miss Dot had spent 2 years drawing out of him. He had written to Shaquille O'Neal's foundation 6 months ago with Miss Dot's name, the school address, and a single sentence about what was about to happen to her job. He was standing by the hallway entrance with a coffee cup in his hand. He set it down slowly so he would not spill it. Helen Park was 71 years old. Former librarian at Cole for 22 years, volunteer 3 mornings a week because, as she told anyone who asked, she had tried retirement twice and found it disagreeable. She was in the chair beside the window, with a laminated newsletter in her lap. She watched Sandra make the call. She watched Officer Dawson come through the door. She folded the newsletter and watched everything with the patience of a woman who knows exactly when to speak. At the far end of the corridor, a parent volunteer was walking a group of 8th graders past on a hallway pass. One of them, a boy in a red jacket, maybe 13, slowed down when he caught a look at the man standing in the front office. He stopped completely. His mouth opened. The volunteer touched his shoulder to keep him moving. He went. But his head turned back twice before the corridor bent and took him away. And from 117 feet away, behind 2 sets of doors, the voice of Dorothy Caldwell continued reading aloud to her class. Gary Soto. The same poem. The first Tuesday of every month, for 38 years. Within 3 minutes of Officer Dawson arriving, Sandra had walked another parent through the front desk, offered a printed document, answered a question about enrollment deadlines, and done all of it without looking at the man in the hoodie. Procedures were what she had left. She was not going to let them go. Then, the boy in the red jacket came back. He was at the glass door with one other kid beside him now, both of them trying hard not to look like they were staring and failing completely. The one in the red jacket said it the way 13-year-olds say things they cannot believe are true. That's Shaq. Flat out. No whisper. That is literally Shaq. Both of them had their phones out before the sentence finished. Something moved behind Sandra Murdoch's eyes. Not quite shame, not quite panic, but living in the neighborhood of both. She looked at the man in the navy hoodie. He looked back at her. Completely still. Hands open at his sides, the way Philip Harrison had taught him to stand when a room was deciding what he was. Not a reaction, a response. "Ma'am," he said. One word. Quietly, not a challenge. A door held open. "But here is where you are going to have to wait just a little longer. Because before you hear what he said next, you need to understand something about that manila envelope in Sandra Murdoch's desk drawer. Something that had been running in a parallel story, invisible to everyone in that lobby, the entire time. A story that did not start 3 weeks ago, or 19 years ago, but on the exact same morning in the fall of 1991, when a 13-year-old boy from New Jersey walked into this building and sat down in a classroom that smelled like coffee and old books. You need to feel the full weight of what Sandra had been carrying before you understand what came next, because the second you understand it, everything you think you know about her changes completely. Nobody moved. Officer Dawson's radio crackled once and went quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. From 117 feet away, the voice of Dorothy Caldwell kept reading. Nobody said a word. Shaquille O'Neal reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and took out a single folded piece of paper. Not a phone, not a document from a legal team. A piece of paper, old, soft at the creases, the kind that has been folded and unfolded so many times it holds the shape of someone's hands. He placed it on the counter between himself and Sandra Murdoch. Did not unfold it. Did not explain it. Just put it there. "Before I go down that hall," he said, "I need you to understand something." He put 2 fingers on the paper. "My stepfather kept this for 30 years. He told me about it 11 months ago in a hospital room in Newark. He passed 6 weeks after that." Philip Harrison's challenge coin was in his right pocket. Philip Harrison had been right for 50 years. He was not going to be wrong now. This is a letter from Houston ISD. Dated August 1991, an offer of employment for the head of their English department at Lamar High School. Salary 3 times what she was making here. He paused. She turned it down. She wrote "declined" across the top in red pen, and at the bottom she wrote 4 words. He looked up and met Sandra's eyes. Do you want to hear them? Sandra Murdoch did not answer, but she did not look away. My students need me, he said. That's all she wrote. 4 words. My students need me. He stepped back from the counter. I have been trying to figure out how to pay that debt for 11 months. And then Marcus. He looked once at Marcus Webb, who had not moved from the spot where he had planted himself. Found me. And told me what the district was planning to do to her. Sandra Murdoch made a sound. Just one. The sound a person makes when 2 things they have been holding in separate rooms of themselves arrive at the same place at the same time. She opened the desk drawer. She took out the manila envelope. She placed it on the counter beside the folded Houston letter and stood there looking at both of them. And Helen Park, from the chair beside the window, who had said nothing, who had watched everything, who had folded and refolded the same newsletter without reading it, said, quietly, without looking up, "Show him." Sandra looked at her for a moment. Then something in her face gave way, the way a wall gives way when the thing holding it up is finally removed. She slid the envelope across the counter. Shaquille opened it. Inside was the district letter. Budget realignment. Position elimination. Mrs. Dorothy Caldwell, effective May 30th. Behind it, paper-clipped, in Sandra's own handwriting, 7 pages. Formal objections. Budget alternatives. Letters from 21 years of former students. At the top of the first page, in Sandra's handwriting, she stayed for all of them. Someone has to stay for her. Shaquille read all 7 pages. Then he took out his phone and stepped 4 feet to the left and made a call. It took 3 minutes and 40 seconds. When he came back, he put the phone in his pocket and said, "The Dorothy Caldwell Teacher Excellence Fund. We're endowing it today. Full salary, full benefits, 2 additional teaching positions at this school, funded for 15 years. That is not a negotiation, that is a phone call that is already in progress." He paused for 1 second. She is not retiring on May 30th. She retires when she decides to retire. Marcus Webb put both hands over his face. Officer Dawson looked at the wall. Helen Park turned back to her newsletter. Then Shaquille looked at Marcus. "Your student teaching placement," he said. "You still have it. And after you finish, there will be a position here. I'll make sure of that personally." Marcus Webb nodded once and did not trust himself to speak. Sandra Murdoch sat down. She had not planned to. She looked at the folded Houston letter, still on the counter, and said almost to herself, she turned down Houston, not as a question, as something arriving that she had not been waiting for and could not have prepared for. "Fall semester 1991, Shaquille said. Sandra's face changed in a way that had nothing to do with him anymore. "Fall semester 1991, she said, slowly. I was a sophomore at UTSA. I was in my 2nd deferment year. I thought I was still going back to nursing school. My mother had just gotten worse again, and I didn't know what I was going to do." She put her hand flat on the counter. "I used to come to this school after hours. I used to sit in her classroom doing my mother's insurance paperwork because it was the only quiet room I could find. She would bring me coffee. She never once asked what I was doing there. She looked up. She never told me she had an offer from Houston. She was just here, every single day." A long pause. "She stayed that year for her students, you said." "My students need me," he said again. That's what she wrote. Plural. Sandra pressed her hand to her mouth, because she understood now what no one in that front office had understood before this moment. What the whole story had been moving toward without anyone seeing it. Miss Dot had not stayed in 1991 for one student. She had stayed for every person who needed a quiet room, and a woman who brought them coffee and did not ask questions. She had stayed for a boy from New Jersey who could not read at grade level. She had stayed for a sophomore who had nowhere safe to sit with her paperwork and her grief. She had stayed for 21 years of letters that Sandra had collected and filed and used to fight for her. She had stayed for Marcus Webb, who left and came back, and for the boy in the red jacket who was still standing at the glass door because he did not want to miss what happened next. She had stayed for all of them. And Sandra Murdoch, who had spent 3 weeks fighting for this woman alone and losing, who had made 7 phone calls and written 7 pages, and attended 1 board meeting where nobody looked up from their phones, understood now that she had not been fighting alone at all. She had been fighting alongside every person Miss Dot had ever refused to give up on. 2 storylines, same route. Neither one had known about the other. That was the story no one in that lobby had been watching. Philip Harrison had been right. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. Shaquille had driven to this school and stood still in this lobby and said nothing when the words came, because that is what his stepfather had taught him. Not to answer a moment with anger, but to wait for it to show him what it actually was. And it had shown him. It was Sandra. It was Marcus. It was Helen. It was every single person in that building who had been trying to hold something together that deserved to be held. They walked down the hallway together. All of them. Shaquille O'Neal, Marcus Webb, Sandra Murdoch, Helen Park, who got up from her chair without being asked, Officer Dawson, who clipped his radio back to his belt and fell into step because there was nothing left to secure except the moment itself. Dorothy Caldwell looked up when the door to her classroom opened. She was standing at the front of the room with a book in her hand and 31 8th graders watching her in the particular silence of students who have forgotten they didn't want to be there. She looked at the man in the doorway. He was very large. He was wearing a plain hoodie. He was crying and not trying especially hard to stop. She looked at him the way she had looked at every student who had ever walked through her door carrying something heavy, without alarm, without performance, with a steadiness that said, "Whatever you have brought in here, we will figure out what to do with it." She said what she had always said. "Come in. Sit down." A woman who stayed instead of leaving gave a boy 4 years when he needed them most. A vice principal who lost her fight found out she had not been losing it alone. A young man who came back to school because of her found a reason to stay. An old librarian said exactly 3 words at exactly the right moment, which was all that was ever required. And a man who had driven across the state on a Tuesday morning with a folded letter in his pocket finally paid 32 years of a debt that was never going to feel paid enough. Because debts like that are not about enough. They are about showing up. My students need me. She never stopped meaning it. And neither should you. Drop a comment below and write the name of the teacher who refused to give up on you. Just their name. Because they deserve to be remembered. If this story reached you the way it reached us, hit that like button. That is the only way these kinds of stories find the people who need them. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of people who believe the most powerful thing a person can do is stay. And when you are ready, our next video is right here, and we will see you there.